بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. به نام خداوند بخشنده مهربان. تنزیل الکتاب من الله العزیز الحکیم. این کتاب عظیم الشأن قرآن از جانب خدای مقتدر حکیم نازل گردید. إنا أنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق فاعبد الله مخلصا له الدين. ما این کتاب را بر تو به حق فرستادیم، خدای را پرستش کن و دین را برای او خالص گردان. الا لله الدین الخالص. الا لله الدين الخالص والذين اتخذوا من دونه أولياء ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله. ای بندگان آگاه باشید که دین خالص بی هیچ شک و ریا برای خداست و اما آنان که غیر خدا را به دوستی و پرستش برگرفتند و گفتند ما آن بتان را نمی پرستیم مگر برای اینکه ما را به درگاه خدای نیک مقرب گرداند. والذین اتخذوا من دونه أولياء ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله. ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى إن الله يحكم بينهم فيما هم فيه يختلفون. خدا البته این عذر نپذیرد و میان آنها در آنچه با حق خلاف کنند حکم خواهد کرد و به کیفرشان میرساند که خدا هرگز آن کس که بسیار کافر نعمت و دروغگوست هدایت نخواهد کرد. ان الله لا یهدی من هو کاذب کفار. اگر خدا می‌خواست فرزندی برای خود اختیار کند، همانا هر که را از مخلوقاتش خواستی برمی‌گزید. ولیکن این نقص است و آن خدای فرد قهار میمانند از هر گونه نقص و آلایشی پاک و منزه است. لو أراد الله أن يتخذ ولدا لاصطفى مما يخلق ما يشاء سبحانه هو الله الواحد القهار. آسمان ها و زمین را به حق و راستی برای حکمت و غرض ثابتی ایجاد کرد و شب را به روز و روز را به شب بپوشاند و خورشید و ماه را مسخر کرده تا هر یک بر مدار خود به مقدار معین گردش کنند. باری ای بندگان آگاه باشید که او خدای مقتدر و مطلق آمرزنده است. خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق يكور الليل على النهار ويكبر النهار على الليل وسخر الشمس والقمر كل يجري لأجل مسمى كل يجري لأجل مسمى على هو العزيز او شما نوع بشر را از یک تن آدم آفرید، پس از آن جفت او حوا را قرار داد و برای استفاده شما نوع بشر 8 قسم از شاهپایان ایجاد کرد و شما را در باطن رحم مادران در 3 تاریکی با تحولات گوناگون بدین خلقت زیبا بیافرید. خلقكم من نفس واحدة ثم جعل منها زوجها وأنزل لكم من الأنعام 8 أزواج يخلقكم في بطون أمهاتكم خلقا من بعد خلق في ظلمات 3 و هیچ خدایی جز او در عالم نیست. پس ای مشرکان از درگاه به کجا می‌روید؟ ذلكم الله ربكم له الملك لا إله إلا هو فعنا تصرفون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد. زیارتی که شما می‌خونید زیارت ششم امیرالمومنینه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا حافظا قائدا وناصرا ودليلا وغنينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توبا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا أمين الله. السلام على من اصطفاه الله واختصه واختاره من بريته. السلام عليك يا خليل الله ما نجى الليل وغسق وأضاء النهار وأشرق. السلام عليك ما صمت صامت ونطق ناطق وذر شارق ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على مولانا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صاحب السوابق والمناقب والنجدة ومبيد الكتائب الشديد البأس العظيم المراس المكين الأساس ساق المؤمنين بالكأس من حوض الرسول المكين الأمين. السلام على صاحب النهى والفضل والطمائل والمكرمات والنوائل. السلام على فارس المؤمنين وليث الموحدين وقاتل المشركين وبصير رسول رب العالمين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على من أيده الله بجبرائيل وأعانه بميكائيل وأزلفه في الدارين وحماه
وصلى الله عليك وعلى آله الطاهرين وعلى أولاده المنتجبين وعلى الأئمة الراشدين الذين أمروا بالمعروف ونهوا عن المنكر وفرضوا علينا الصلوات وأمروا بإيتاء الزكاة وغرفونا صيام شهر رمضان وقراءة القرآن. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ويعصوم الدين وقائد الغر المحجلين. السلام عليك يا باب الله. السلام عليك يا عين الله الناظرة ويده الباسطة وأذنه الواعي واعية وحكمته البالغة ونعمته الصادقة ونقمته الدامغة. السلام على قسيم الجنة والنار. السلام على نعمة الله على الأبرار ونقمته على الفجار. السلام على سيد المتقين الأخيار. السلام على أخي رسول الله وابن عمه وزوج ابنته والمخلوق من طينته. السلام على الأصل القديم والفرع الكريم. السلام على الثمر الجنين. السلام على أبي الحسن غلي. السلام على شجرة طوبى وسدرة المنتهى. السلام على آدم صفوة الله ونوحا نبي الله وإبراهيم خليل الله ومحمد حبيب الله ومن بينهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين وحسن أولئك رفيقا. السلام على نور الأنوار وسنير الأطهار ومناصر الأخيار. السلام على والد الأئمة الأبرار. السلام على حبل الله المتين وجنبه المكين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على أمين الله في أرضه وخليفتك بالحاكم بأمره والقيم بدينه والناطق بحكمته والعامل بكتابه أخي الرسول وزوج البتول وسيف الله المسلول. السلام على صاحب الجلالات والآيات الباقرات والمعجزات الباقرات الحلكات الذي ذكره الله في محكم آيات فقال تعالى وإنه في أم الكتاب لدينا لعلي حكيم. السلام على اسم الله الرديء ووجهه المضيء وجنبه الغليظ ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على حجج الله وأوصيائه وخاصة الله وأصفيائه وخالصته وأمنائه ورحمة الله وبركاته. قصدتك يا مولاي يا أمين الله وحجته زائرا غارفا بحقه مباليا لأوليائه مغاديا لأبدائه متقربا إلى الله بزيارته فاشفع لي قد الله ربي بربك في خلاص رغبتي من النار وقضاء حوائج الدنيا والآخرة. سلام الله وسلام ملائكته المقربين والمسلمين لك بقلوبهم يا أمير المؤمنين والناطقين بفضلك والشاهدين على أنك صادق الأمين صديق عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشهد أنك طهر طاهر مطهر من طهر طاهر مطهر. أشهد لك يا ولي الله وولي رسوله بالبلاغ والأداء وأشهد أنك جنب الله وبابه وأنك حبيب الله ووجهه الذي يؤتى وأنك سبيل الله وأنك عبد الله وأخو رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله. أتيتك متقربا إلى الله عز وجل بزيارتك راغبا إليك في الشفاعة ابتغي بشفاعتك خلاص رغبتي من النار متغمدا بك من النار هاربا من ذنوبي التي احتطبتها على ظهري فزعا إليك رجاء رحمة ربي. أتيتك أستجبر بك يا مولاي وأتقرب بك إلى الله ليقضي بك حوائجي فاشفع لي يا أمير المؤمنين إلى الله فإني عبد الله ومولاك وزائرك ولك عند الله المقام المحمود والجاه العظيم والشأن الكبير والشفاعة المقبولة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد، وصل على أمير المؤمنين عبدك المرتضى وأمينك الأوفى وعربتك الوثقى ويدك العليا وجنبك الأعلى وكلمتك الحسنى وحجتك على البراء وصديقك الأكبر وسيد الأوصياء وركن الأولياء وعماد الأسفياء أمير المؤمنين ويعصوب الدين وقدوة الصالحين وإمام المخلصين المعصوم من الخلال المهذب من الزلال المطهر من الري المنزه من الري أخي نبيك وبسي رسولك البائت على فراشه والمباسي له بنفسه وكاشف الكرب عن وجهه الذي جعلته سيفا لنبوته وآية لرسالته وشاهدا على أمته ودلالة على حجته وحاملا لرايته ووقاية لمهجته وغاديا لأمته ويدا لبأسه وتاجا لرأسه وبابا لسره ومفتاحا لظفره حتى هزم جيوش الشرك بإذنك وأباد عساكر الكفر بأمرك وبذل نفسه في مرضاة رسولك وجعلها وقفا على طاعته صل اللهم عليه صلاة دائمة باقية. السلام عليك يا ولي الله والشباب الثاقبة والنور الراقبة يا سليل الأطائر يا سر الله إن بيني وبين الله تعالى ذنوبا قد أثقلت ظهري ولا يأتي عليها إلا رضاه فبحق من ائتمنك على سره واستراك أمر خلق الكل إلى الله شفيعا ومن الله مجيرا وعلى الدهر ظهيرا فإني عبد الله ووليك وزائرك صلى الله عليه. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار سوب غبر أبي عبد الله سلامكم تاني. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله أتيتكما زائرا ومتوسلا إلى الله تعالى ربي وربكما ومتوجها إلى الله بكما ومستشفى بكما إلى الله في حاجتي يا الله شفاعة المضطرين ويا كاشف كرب المكروبين واصرفني بقضاء حاجتي وكفاية ما أهمني همه من أمر دنياي وآخرتي يا أرحم الراحمين. سلام آخر أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين والسلام على أبي عبد الله الحسين ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار لا جعله الله آخر الغد مني لزيارتكما ولا فرق الله بيني وبينكما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
I'd like to invite Dr. Hussein to deliver a speech with Ilham Salawat by Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والنجم إذا هوى ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى وما ينطق عن الهوى إن هو إلا وحي يوحى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'd like to begin by offering the sincerest of condolences over the night of the striking of our master Mawla Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. When we look at heroes of old, across different cultures, different mythologies, different histories, different eras, different times, we find that very often there's a particular trait that defines them, a certain skill that lies at the core of their success. They excel in one particular area, but at the same time, they have other weaknesses, what has classically been known as a hamartia. That is a particular fatal flaw that causes them some strife along their journey. So if we take some fictional characters, so for example, Spock from Star Trek, or Sherlock Holmes is perhaps the best example, as he is described in the original Arthur Conan Doyle works, he is very rational, very logical, very reasoned. But this very trait leads to a deficiency in other areas. He is not as emotionally intelligent. He is not as able or as tactful to deal with other human beings. And that is what makes his sidekick, Dr. Watson, so important, because he provides that support that Sherlock doesn't have. That's why Sherlock in the original novels calls him his great conductor. But when we look at Imam Ali alayhi salam, we find that he breaks this rule. He excels not only in every category that we analyze, but he also breaks the traditional rules. That if someone, for example, is very intelligent, then they're supposed to be have emotional shortcomings. Or if someone is very arrogant or powerful on the battlefield, then they're supposed to struggle at home. That's the way it tends to work if you look as a general theme across old histories and mythologies. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, he breaks this. And he breaks it in a very unique way. Because if you were just to have a hero who won everything and excelled in everything, it becomes quite boring. Right? If you look at the example of Superman, it's very difficult to make a good Superman movie because he just beats everyone all the time. And kryptonite's a very poor kind of way to address this problem. Imam Ali alayhi salam's story, though, again doesn't fall into this pitfall. Because although he was a man of such perfection, a hero of such great accolades, there were many deficiencies, though not within him, but rather around him. The society, the situation, and the challenges that he faced, and the way he had to approach those challenges in a fashion that he couldn't just solve them in that moment, but he had to solve them for all eternity. And this is how Imam Ali alayhi salam, as his character, as his life, it remains so compelling that he remains one of the most interesting, one of the most profound individuals ever to have walked this planet. So inshallah, in tonight's discussion, I wanted to look at some of the characteristics of Imam Ali alayhi salam on the battlefield. 3 particular examples. But alongside them, we'll see how he combines them with their antithetical counterparts. How despite showing such prowess in one area, he also manages to ensure the greatest in its contrasting quality. The first example is from the Battle of Uhud, one of the most famous battles in the history of Islam, because this was the first battle that the Muslims that they lost. And they didn't lose, of course, because of the Holy Prophet. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had seen it coming. He knew that when they routed the Makkans, that they would come around. Khalid bin Walid, who was leading the enemy army at the time, would very obviously try and outflank the Muslims by coming around the mountain. So he placed on the mountain 50 archers under the command of a man called Abdullah ibn Jubayr. But alas, all of the Muslims there, apart from a couple, including Abdullah ibn Jubayr himself, they ran away. They saw that the battle was being won, so they went chasing after loot. And this gave Khalid an ample opportunity to come round and flank the Muslims, number 1. Number 2, a man by the name of Mus'ab ibn Umayr, one of the glorious companions of the Holy Prophet. He was martyred during the battle, and he resembled the Holy Prophet in physical appearance. So in the chaos of the battlefield, when he fell, the cry began to go around the battlefield that Rasulullah has been killed. And a lot of the Muslims became terrified. And they thought that their fighting was no longer futile, whilst others, of course, continued to fight for his message. And finally, Wahshi was sent by Hind for seeking revenge after what happened at the Battle of Badr. And so he was tasked with either killing the Holy Prophet, who was too well protected, Imam Ali alayhi salam, who was invincible on the battlefield, or Hazrat Hamza, the beloved uncle of the Holy Prophet. And when his back was turned for no one dared face him head on, Wahshi threw a spear from a distance and struck Hazrat Hamza, and he fell to the floor. And it was a great blow to the morale of the Muslims of that time. All of these three factors combined led to flight from the battlefield. And it was a difficult time because after the victory at Badr, the Muslims had finally been established. It looked like they had some sort of future. This rout threatened to end Islam. But the Meccans' victory condition was very clear. The only way they could win this battle was if they killed the Holy Prophet. That was the whole point of the battle. That is why Abu Sufyan was pressured by Hind into coming down. That was the way. If you killed the Holy Prophet, you would destroy Islam. And the Muslims, they had shown, if they thought that the Prophet was killed, that they were ready to leave. But, of course, they planned and Allah plans. And Allah is the best of planners. The enemy, they came so close to the Holy Prophet that he was in great physical peril. And we don't tend to appreciate this enough. There are different narrations that tell us how he was injured. One of the enemy soldiers managed to hit the Holy Prophet on the head. He was wearing a helmet, but part of the helmet pierced his face and blood was streaming down. Another enemy of Allah threw a stone at the Holy Prophet, a large rock that hit his teeth and dislodged a couple of them. And he was pushed back into a pit. It looked like his demise was certain. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala captures this moment in the Holy Quran. In Surah Al Imran, verse 153, Allah describes the event. He says, behold, you were climbing up the high ground without even looking back, not even a side glance, whilst the apostle was calling you from your rear. The Prophet was calling them back, but they were so lost in the battle, in their flight, that they refused to come back. But of course, who remained? Mawla Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And he fought in a legendary fashion. And Tabari, he records quite a beautiful description of the event, volume 7, page 119 to 120. And he says that Jibreel was so struck with how great the bravery of Imam Ali alayhi salam was on the battlefield. He couldn't hold his love. He couldn't hold back, and he shrieked out. The cry was heard across the battlefield, La fatah illa Ali, la sayf illa dhul fiqar. There is no warrior but Ali, there is no sword but the dhul fiqar. And the narration continues that Jibreel, he then goes down to the Holy Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, this is the height of bravery and loyalty. And the Rasulullah's response is wonderful. In the narration, Rasulullah responds, why not? Are you surprised? This is Ali ibn Abi Talib that we're talking about. If all of Arabia is on the other side of the battlefield, it doesn't matter. For Imam Ali is standing in there. He says, why not? Ali is from me, and I am from Ali. And in the verses I recited at the beginning from Surah Najm, Rasulullah says nothing of his own desire. It is not but a revelation that is revealed. This is a godly accolade through the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And what Imam Ali alayhi salam teaches us here is that we don't always have to be with the majority. Very often, especially as followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt, it is very common to feel intimidated. It is very often that we look around that not only are Muslims a minority in the Western world, but we're a minority within a minority. And politically around the world, Shias are suffering. You look at Yemen, you look at the Hazaras in Pakistan. Many different places around the world, they are struggling specifically because they are Shia. And sometimes it is inevitable that we look back and we wonder, well, if there's so many people on the other side, maybe I should join them. But of course, such a thought never struck Imam Ali alayhi salam's mind. As the founder of existentialism, Soren Kierkegaard, he describes this. He says, truth always rests with the minority, because the minority is generally formed by those who really have opinions, whilst the majority is formed by gangs with no opinion. Of course, when you're in the minority, you ask the questions, you wonder, but if you have evidence, if you have reason to believe what you believe in, then being in the minority is actually a blessing, not a curse. That is one lesson we can learn from Imam Ali alayhi salam at Uhud, one of the countless. The second example that we see contradictory qualities of Imam Ali alayhi salam, we find at the Battle of Battle of Khandaq. Now, when the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he gathered the Muslims for this third battle, this was now the complete opposite to the prelude to the Battle of Uhud. Before Uhud, the Muslims, they were confident, they had won at the Battle of Badr, they had established themselves. Now at Khandaq, it looked like they had no hope. There was no chance of victory. The Makkans, they gathered an army of 10,000. Those kind of numbers were unheard of. These were people of small tribes and families. You would have armies of hundreds, possibly thousands. At Badr, when the enemy had 1,000, that was something substantial. But here, when they come with 10,000, it looks like defeat is assured. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He captures the zeitgeist so well in Surah 33, verse number 10. When He says, when they came upon you from above and below, and the eyes turned dull, and the hearts rose up to your throats, and you began to think adverse things about the Holy Prophet, that you began to doubt his veracity, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, came to their aid. Under the advice of Hazrat Salman Farsi, they had built a trench based on what he had observed from Roman practice. And the enemy, they were stopped outside the city, but they laid siege. They were stopping anything from going in or coming out. Amr ibn Abd Wud, he was one of those classic Arabian heroes. The kind of man who had very little patience. Again, contradictory qualities, right? He was so powerful on the battlefield, so brash, so arrogant, so great, that he had no patience. Unlike Imam Ali alayhi salam. He couldn't take the siege. He said, this is boring. This is going on too long. So with a few companions of his, he managed to jump over a weak part of the trench. Now, when Amr ibn Abd Wud crossed the trench, this is perhaps what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to when their hearts came up to their throats. Because at this point they were terrified. And Amr, he issued a challenge against the Muslims, and it is a timeless challenge. He said, come and fight me. Come and fight me, because if you are correct, if what you believe in is true, then you literally have nothing to lose. Why? Because if you fight me and you die, you will die a martyr. So you'll go straight to paradise. Celebrate. I'll be sending you to heaven. And if you fight and kill me, then you will win both paradise and this world. The Muslims, they didn't budge. Nobody wanted to face off against such a warrior who had such legendary victories in his past and in his history. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he asks the Muslims who is going to come forth and defend Islam. And again, this is defending Islam both literally. If the Muslims fell here, that was the end of Islam, literally. But also metaphorically. It is a challenge to the very core of what Muslims believe in. He is not only challenging the Muslims to a duel physically on the battlefield, but he is challenging their very belief, their very iman. Because the logic of what he is saying is true. Of course, when Rasulullah needs help, he says, Ya Ali Madad, Imam Ali alayhi salam comes forward and he goes to fight against Amr ibn Abd. And Amr initially, he thought that it was a joke. Imam Ali was so young, and he had actually seen the Imam grow up. And he thought, no, this can't be true. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, if you stand against my Prophet, I will never let you go. And so the battle ensued. Imam Ali alayhi salam, of course, when he raised his little faqar, there was no one who would survive. There's no one who could defeat him. And Amr ibn Abd Wud, he was struck to his death on the battlefield. But what happened afterwards was profound. Because Amr ibn Abd Wud, after all of his victories, after all of his the riches he managed to amass, he was one of the richest people in Arabia. His shields, the armor that he wore, his sword, they were encrusted with jewels, and they had become quite well known around Arabia. Now, Muslims at the Battle of Uhud, they were chasing after loot, right? They wanted wealth. Imam Ali alayhi salam struck down Amr ibn Abd Wud. What does he do when he sees all of this wealth on the floor? He leaves it. He doesn't even look twice. And he leaves Amr to be buried honorably. Amr's sister, she was very close to Amr, but she never watched the duels anymore. Earlier on in the life, she would watch because, she would wonder, my brother, he's in great peril. I want to make sure that he comes back alive. Now he had won so many duels. He was so prolific on the battlefield, she didn't even care anymore. Not that she didn't love her brother, but the outcome was a foregone conclusion. So when they came and told her that your brother has been killed on the battlefield, she couldn't believe it. She almost went mad with grief, and she ran out shrieking to the battlefield to go and see the body of her brother. But what she saw surprised her even more, because when she came to the body of Ali, all of his armor was there, and he was left with utmost respect, not defiled or disrespected in the smallest fashion. In Al-Abqariyat, we read that she recited lines of poetry. She said, if someone other than Ali had killed Amr, I would have mourned his death my entire life. But the man who killed him is a hero, is peerless, and his father was also a lord. This is the holistic nature of Imam Ali alayhi salam's Islam. It doesn't matter what the situation, even though he's on the battlefield, even in the heat of the moment, even in the madness of what is to happen and the challenge that was put forth by Amr ibn Abd Wud, he maintains the greatest of akhlaq, the greatest of compassion, so much so that even the sister of the man who he has killed cannot hold back her love for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Just like Jibreel couldn't hold himself back at Uhud, here Amr's sister couldn't hold herself back at Khandaq. And from this, we learned from Imam Ali alayhi salam about the importance of being good winners. We talk a lot about being a sore loser, right? That when things don't go your way, you don't really concede to the opposition or whatnot. But ultimately, when you lose, you don't have a choice, right? You've lost. That's it. But if you win, then there is a multitude of options going forward. You can be arrogant, you can be humble, you can be haughty, you can be disrespectful. But Imam Ali alayhi salam teaches us here that even when the stakes are as high as they were, Rasulullah says that it was kull iman versus kull kufr. And in Al-Hakim's Mustadrak, he makes a remarkable comment that the strike of Ali ibn Abi Talib on that day is worth more than all of the actions of the entire Muslim Ummah from then up until the day of Qiyamah. And yet the stakes are so great, Imam Ali alayhi salam maintains his calm and his composure. And such we find that combination of those contradictory qualities. And the final example that we will look at from the life of Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi is from one of the most tragic events that took place in the history of Islam. And this was the Battle of Jamal. Now, there is no Muslim who argues that Jamal was a success, that the Battle of Jamal was a good thing. Everybody agrees it was a tragedy. There were more Muslims, by the way, more Muslims were killed in the battles of Jamal and Siffin than every single battle the Holy Prophet ever fought at. You add the number of Muslim casualties together, more died at Jamal and Siffin. It was a tragedy that Islam had never seen before. Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he becomes Khalif, they come and they beg him. They beg him to become Khalif. Because up until the run-in of Uthman's Khilafah, when it comes after he was assassinated, after he was murdered, the Islamic Empire was in disarray. And the only man who could bring it together was Imam Ali alayhi salam. So all people from different backgrounds, including Talha and Zubayr, two of the prominent companions of the Holy Prophet, they begged him to become Khalif. And Imam Ali, he was reluctant. He didn't want to at this stage. It was a very difficult task. And yet when he becomes Khalif, he's Khalif for 4 years. During 4 years of his Khilafah, he fights 3 civil wars. He fights the Battle of Jamal, the Battle of Siffin, and then the Battle of Nahrawan. And Nahrawan was caused by his own hypocritical and own traitorous forces from the Battle of Siffin itself. So at the Battle of Jamal, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he is Khalif. Now he knows the greatest threat in his empire, the greatest threat for the Muslims is Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan. That he was gathering an army and he was ready to fight against the Imam. That was the most important long-term threat. And so he wanted to fight against Muawiyah, but because of what Talha, Zubayr, and one of the wives of the Prophet, Lady Aisha, they had gathered an army, Imam Ali, he had to divert towards Basra. He had to, and this gave Muawiyah more time to consolidate his position. Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he's leaving the city of Medina, he says his farewells. He goes to the grave of Rasulullah A'zam sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And he goes to the grave of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, and with tears in his eyes, he bids them farewell. And it is very similar to the way that his son, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, would do the same thing, this farewell. And it was a common tradition amongst the later Imams when they were torn away from Medina for whatever reason. Now, Talha and Zubair, they were two of the important instigators of the war, but each of them met a very dubious end. Zubair, in the Battle of Jamal, Imam Ali alayhi salam called him for. Imam Ali was desperate to avoid the encounter. Anything he could possibly do, he tried, he exhausted all options. Even just before the battle, he called one after the other. He called Zubair, he called Talha, he called Lady Aisha. To Zubair, he reminded him of a tradition that the Holy Prophet said to him, "O Zubair, would you believe me if one day I told you that you would fight against Ali ibn Abi Talib?" And Zubair was a very upright companion. He was a very good person. And he says, "Of course not. This is madness. I would never fight against Ali ibn Abi Talib." When Zubair remembered this tradition, he said, "Ya Ali, if I had remembered this, I never would have come to Jannah." So he left. He left the battle. He didn't fight in the battle that he helped to start. And there was a man who chased after him and murdered him in his salah. Talha, according to Ibn Sa'd in his Tabaqat, he was in the army of Aisha, but what happened? Marwan ibn al-Hakam had an arrow fired at him from behind. It hit Talha in his thigh and he died from his wounds. And Marwan ibn al-Hakam then remarked, "After this day, I will never need to seek revenge for the killers of Uthman." It's an intriguing narration. But of course, the final one who was left was Lady Aisha. When the battle took place, Muslims were being killed in their thousands. It was a great tragedy. Imam Ali alayhi salam fought on the battlefield, and one of his commanders, his greatest commander, was a man by the name of Malik al-Ashtar, a truly profound individual. And he noticed that the enemy, they managed to gather around the camel. This is why it was called the Battle of Jamal, around the camel of Aisha. Because it was sort of equivalent to their standard. It was the center of their hope and their victory in the battle. And they were circling around this camel in quite a zealous way. When you read the narrations, they would literally throw their bodies and their arms and their legs in front of the camel to try and protect it. It's quite intriguing the kind of zeal that they went to. Hazrat Malik al-Ashtar, he goes forward and he strikes down the legs of the camel until Aisha falls down. Now, pause for just a moment. Try and think about how heavy the heart of Ali ibn Abi Talib is, alayhi salam. He has seen so much bloodshed. No matter what he tried, no matter what he did, he couldn't prevent it. What happens next? Now he has them at his mercy. He sends Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr, one of the sons of Abu Bakr, a truly wonderful person, but who was mahram to Aisha, and said, "Go and take her, look after her." And he collected her with all due respect, no humiliation, no public castigation, and he transported her all the way back to Medina, back to her house. He then went to Basra, he took the army, all of the people thought now they're in for it, they're going to be executed, they're going to be punished for what they did, and he said to all of you, "I extend my rahmah, my forgiveness, you are free, just don't do it again." And it is truly an unbelievable moment in the history of Islam. And it feels very much like when the Holy Prophet arrived in Makkah. Why did the Prophet, when he went to Makkah, not punish the people for the crimes they had committed? If he didn't ask for revenge, at least punishment. He didn't. Why? Because it was so important for the unity of Islam. For the establishment of Islam, he needed all Muslims, Makkah and Medina, together. And in the same way, Imam Ali alayhi salam, after the Battle of Jamal, following in the footsteps of the Holy Prophet, he needed to ensure that Islam would not fracture. Imam teaches us, again, contradictory qualities. On the one hand, he is lost in the chaos of the battle, but on the other, he's not just looking in front of him. He's not looking 10 steps ahead, he's looking 1,000. He looks not only for victory in this battle, but he looks for victory of Islam. The Holy Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they look at the long term. And as Allah promises us in the Holy Quran, the ultimate victory is for the pious. But this sacrifice of our master, of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to keep Islam together, it was not a one-off. It was not simply now that he had sacrificed everything he did at Jamal and at Safin, at Nahrawan, and then eventually in the month of Ramadan, on 19th of Ramadan, that was not enough. For indeed, Islam would continue to break, and it was for his children to bring it back together again. It would cost the blood of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. It would cost the life of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And all of the Imams afterwards, one after the other, they would be martyred. But this enmity for Ali Muhammad, it would not end there. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, he finds himself on the 19th of Ramadan. He is heading out to the mosque, but he knows what's coming. This is one of the tests of Imam Ali alayhi salam. We talk about the perfection. His perfection was a difficulty for him because he would never forego his morals. He goes towards the masjid and he knows that today is his last. He knows that martyrdom awaits for him, but as he makes his journey towards the masjid, it is as if the world is not ready to let him go. His shirt gets caught on the door. He has to detach it. He is walking out of his house. His ducks come chasing after him, grabbing him, wishing that they could hold him back in this dunya. For Allah knows this world needs Ali ibn Abi Talib. But Imam Ali knew what his fate was. He made his way towards the mosque in order to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The wasi of the Prophet, his successor, the great leader at Mubahala, now he is coming to his doom. He goes forward for the morning salah, and he comes to a man who is sleeping, and he wakes this man up. This man was Ibn Muljim. And he implies to Ibn Muljim that he knows what Ibn Muljim's plan is, and he thinks maybe he will have some second thoughts. But Imam Ali alayhi salam leaves him. For this is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for the perfect man who lived the perfect life, there could only be the perfect death. The sujood in the masjid while praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The enemies of Allah, they could never face Ali ibn Abi Talib on the battlefield, so they come behind him when he is in his sujood and they strike him with a sword on his head. Imam Ali alayhi salam, after no battle did he cry out in victory, but as he falls to the floor, he cries out, Fustu wa Rabbil Kaaba, I have won by the Lord of the Kaaba. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he falls down from the strike. Imam Hassan alayhi salam finishes the salah, and now they take their bleeding, dying father back to their home. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he arrives, he says, Oh Hassan, oh Hussein, please leave me be. Don't hold me up from my arms. Don't make me look weak. Why? Because Bibi Zainab can't bear to see me in this fashion. What will she think when she sees me? But oh Ali, come to Karbala and see her move body after body. See what happened with the whip of Shimr ibn al-Jawshan. And she is watching as he sits on the chest of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and slays his neck with a blunted knife. La'natullahi ala qawm al-zalimeen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Fatimata wa abiha
و بعلها و بنیها و سر المستودع فیها بعدد ما احاط به علم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا حتى تسكنه وتمتعه فيها طویلا. هر جای مجلس نشستی الهی بردر آمد بنده بگریخته آبرویش را ز عصیان ریخته چشم دارد که از گناه قبل از آن که در لحد خاکش کنی. امشب امیرالمؤمنین رو واسطه قرار دادی یا الله. ای خدا گم کرده بودم راه ده این بنده گمراه را راه ده این بنده گمراه را. ای خدا من کمترم یا بت پرست چشم امیدم به درگاه تو هست. ای خدا مگذار کار من به من. ای خدا مگذار کار من به من. ارگذاری وای بر احوال من. به امیرالمؤمنین به یعصوب الدین به مولا الموحدین الهی یا ابن الحسن بیا بند دل ما را به دست خویشتن وا کن آقا جانم، بیا بند دل ما را به دست خویشتن وا کن، بیا با یا علی پرونده ما را تو امضا کن. یا ابن الحسن آقا جان، بیا ما را ببر مهدی کنار بستر مولا، به اشک چشم ما زخم سر او را مداوا کن. چه خبر امشب کوفه، همه یتیما با کازه های شیر دور خانه امیر المؤمنین. یا ما را ببر مهدی کنار بستر مولا، ما که چیزی غیر از اشک ججم نداریم، به اشک ججم ما زخم سر او را مداوا کن. یک قصه دار بیبی دو عالم، همسرش فاطمه زهرا بود. خدا دیدم فقط با خون دل گردد نصیب ما، بیا ما را ببر خونین فدای راه زهرا کن. بیا در محفل رندان به حق عمت زینب، بیا و محفل ما را تو زیباتر ز زیبا کن. یا ابن جانم جانم یا ابن مرد غریبی که شده از دنیا خسته، مرد غریبی که شده از دنیا خسته، رو سجاده میباره اشکاش دست دسته، از خون مولا شده محراب مثل دریا، رنگ حسن پریده با دیدن بابا، تو خونه لرزیده دل زینب کبرا، ای وای از این غم، ای وای از این غم، داره عالم یتیم میشه، نه فقط یتیمای کوفه. با گریه زخم سرشو سر میبنده، علی نگاش میکنه و آروم میخنده، با خنده هاش دل حسین از جا کنده. ای وای یزید، برا بچه ها یادآور اون زمانیه که دور بستر مادر بوده. ای وای از این غم، ای وای از این غم، ای وای از این غم. قربونت بشم امیرالمؤمنین، ای کسی که در وصفت آمده لا فتا الا علی، لا سیف الا ذوالفقار. اون آقایی که کشتشم خدایی شیره، حالا حسن زیر بغلاشو میگیره. اگه که زینب ببینش اینجور میمیره، ای وای از این غم. لذا وقتی امیرالمؤمنین رو آوردن به سمت خانه، همچین که نزدیک خانه شد به حسنین فرمودن زیر بغلام و رها کنید، نکنه زینبم منو تو این حال ببینه. آقا جان چقدر مراعات دخترتون زینب رو داشتیم، چقدر امام حسن مجتبی مراد کرد تا گفتن بیبی زینب داره میاد، فرمودن اشاره کردن تشریف ببرید خواهرم نبینه. ای وای ای وای ای وای. اونی که پهلوان ترین مرد زمینه، نمیتونه دیگه یه لحظه هم بشینه، چشماشو بسته خواب زهرا رو میبینه. ای وای از این غم، غم و غصه مولا داره به پایان میرسه. یک گریه کنه بیبی بود، سر به چاه میکرد، درد و دلش رو به جا میفرمودن آقای ما. عالم قدر بیبی دو عالم رو نفهمید، عالم قدر امیرالمؤمنین رو نفهمید. چه کردن با دردانه رسول الله، نور و کوثر را نمیفهمیم ما، قدر آخر نمیفهمیم ما. قدر زهرا را فقط حیدر شناخت، یا سپر را نمیفهمیم ما فقط گریه بلد هستیم و بس. آی غیرتی ها، ما فقط گریه بلد هستیم و بس، روزه در را نمیفهمیم ما. فزه میداند چه شد در آن میاد، فزه میداند چه شد در آن میاد، حرف معجر را نمیفهمیم ما، پیش چشم شوهرش او را زدن. داغ حیدر را نمیفهمیم ما، زخم ابرو را نمیدانیم ما، درد آن سر را نمیفهمیم ما، ناتوان در بین بستر نیم جان، زخم بستر را نمیفهمیم ما. داغ محسنشم تازه شد، هر جا یاد بیبی دو عالم باشه، یاد شهید راه ولایت حضرت محسنم هست. خدا ما رو فدای این 6 ماه های آل الله کنه که 6 ماه اینجا خودش رو فدای مادر کرد، که 6 ماه هم کربلا آقا آمدن کنار خیام، نابلونی به ولدی الرضیع حتی ابده. بیبی زینب کبرا بردن علی اصغر رو، حسین جانم به روی دست رویش را بپوشان، به پیش باد مویش را بپوشان، چو دیدی تیغ و تیر دشمنان را، سفیدی گلویش را بپوش. فصبح الطفل من الورید الى الورید او من الحزن الى الحزن. کار به جایی رسید، از آسمان ندا آمد یا حسین دعه فإن له مرضا فی الجنه. هر جای مجلس نشستی بلند بگو یا حسین، یا حسین، یا حسین، یا علی، 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 یا علی یا علی یا علی یا علی یا حبل المتين عين اليقين حيدر أمير المؤمنين حبل المتين عين اليقين حيدر أمير المؤمنين يا علي يا علي يا علي يا علي يا علي يا علي حبل المتين عين اليقين حيدر أمير المؤمنين حبل المتين عين اليقين این روح خدا بر سرت سایه تو بر سرم همیشه گفتم فقط من شیعه حیدرم من شیعه حیدرم روح خدا بر سرت سایه تو بر سرم همیشه گفتم فقط من شیعه حیدرم من شیعه حیدرم مست علیم که بی شرابم مست علیم که بی شرابم خاک قدم ابو ترابم روزی که دلم پر از شعف شد قبله گه من فقط نجف شد حبل المتین عین الیقین حیدر امیر المؤمنین حبل المتین عین الیقین حیدر امیر المؤمنین ساقی کوثر علی روح مناجات ما حیوان طلای علی قبله حاجات ما قبله حاجات ما تو شمس زمین و آسمانی تو سرور صاحب زمانی بابای کریم هر یتیمی معنی صراط مستقیمی حبل المتین عین الیقین حیدر امیر المؤمنین حبل المتین عین الیقین امیر المؤمنین حیدر امیر المؤمنین یا علی 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 تهممت والله ارکان الهدى تهممت والله ارکان الهدى تهدمت والله ارکان الهدى تهدمت والله شکست تا ابرو فرق مرتضی تهدمت والله شکست تا ابرو فرق مرتضی به مقتل مولا ای قانون یا والله شکست تا ابرو فرق مرتضی به مقتل مولا ای قانون یا پاره شده بنده قلب مصطفی روی زمین افتاد شاه لافتا تهدمت والله ارکان الهدى تهدمت والله تهدمت والله شکست تا ابرو فرق مرتضی به مقتل مولا ای بانون یا ارغه بخون فرق شاه اولیا ارغه از آگشت عرش کبریا شکسته شد فرق شاه دو سرا ارغه بخون روی فخر اولیا تهدمت والله ارکان الهدى شکست تا ابرو فرق مرتضی به مقتل مولا بانو نیا قدم قدم رفته تا عرش اولا صدای زهرا زهرای مرتضی تهدمت والله ارکان الهدى تهدمت والله ارکان الهدى علی 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 سلام ما به علی و نماز آخر او به حال راز و نیاز و به دیده تره سلام ما به علی و نماز آخر او به حال راز و نیاز و به دیده تره سلام ما به علی و به عدل و ایمانش سلام ما به رخ غرق خون و منبر او سلام ما به سجودش که رنگ خون دارد سلام ما به رخ غرق خون اطهر او سلام ما به رخ غرق خون اطهر سلام ما به پریشانی و حسین و حسن سلام ما به دل پر ز آه دختر سلام ما به دل پر ز آه دختر سلام ما به نفس‌های نفس پیدا پیغمبر، سلام ما به نفس‌های نفس پیغمبر، سلام ما به فروغ نگاه آخر او، سلام ما به فروغ نگاه آخر، سلام ما به غمی که از مدینه دارد او، سلام ما به غمی که از مدینه دارد او، سلام ما به ملاقات او و همسر او، سلام ما به ملاقات او و همسر او، بر طاق آسمان نجف نام فاطمه، بر طاق آسمان نجف نام فاطمه است، بالای آستان نجف نام فاطمه است، بالای آستان نجف نام فاطمه است، حتی از آن صحف علی چیز دیگریست، سر تا سر از آن نجف نام فاطمه است، سر تا سر از آن نجف نام فاطمه، جان مدینه جان جهان نام مرتضاست، جان مدینه جان جهان نام مرتضاست، ای جان من که نام نجف نام فاطمه است، ای جان من که جان نجف نام فاطمه است، ما را علی به فاطمه اش هدیه داده است، بر برگه امان نجف نام فاطمه، بر برگه امان نجف نام فاطمه است، بر مشامم میرسد هر لحظه بوی کربلا، بر دلم ترسم بماند آرزوی کربلا، بر دلم ترسم بماند آرزوی کربلا، تشنه آب فراتم به اجل مهلت بده، تا بگیرم در بغل قبر شهید فاطمه، تا بگیرم در بغل شهید فاطمه، ابا عبدالله 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 همین نفس زدن دلم خوشه، به تو و امام حسن دلم خوشه، به همین نفس زدن دلم خوشه، به تو و امام حسن دلم خوشه، به زیارت اومدن دلم خوشه، به زیارت اومدن دلم خوشه، به همین برو بیا دلم خوشه، به تو و امام رضا دلم خوشه، به همین برو بیا دلم خوشه، به تو امام رضا دلم خوشه، به خدا به کربلا دلم خوشه، به خدا به کربلا دلم خوشه به دعای فاطمه دلم خوشه به شهید علقم دلم به دعای فاطمه دلم خوشه به شهید علقم دلم خوشه به علم که دستم دلم خوشه به علم که دستم دلم خوشه دنیا به دنیا به دنیا کربلا آخر دنیا حسین ابن علی آقا حسین ابن علی آقا دستم از ریحت کوتاه کربلا آخر دنیا حسین ابن علی آقا حسین ابن علی آقا به نبی عربی و رسول مدنی و اخیه اسد الله مسمی و علی و به زهراء بتول و به ام ولدتها و به سبطیه و شبلیه هما نجل زکی و به سجاده و بالباقر و صادق حق و به موسی و علی و تقی و نقی و به ذل اسیر و الحجت قائم البحر الذی یضرب بالسیف به حکم حسبی به محمد و علی به محمد و علی اللهم اجل لولیک الفرج اللهم اجل لولیک الفرج اللهم اجل لولیک الفرج اللهم اجل لولیک الفرج یا مهدی یا مهدی یا مهدی یا مهدی یا مهدی یا مهدی دل آرای من شق القمر شد ماه دل آرای من شق القمر از کین دوتا شد وای من فرق پدر خون دلش از فرق او چکیده چون او قریب هیچکی قریب ندیده فصل غم مولا به سر رسیده فزت و رب الکعبه تو آسمون پیچیده وقت وصال فاطمه بهر علی رسیده بهر علی رسیده مولای من مرا مولای من مرا مولای من مرا مولای ذکر تموم انشیا در مسجد کوفه شده محشر بپا، در مسجد کوفه شده محشر بپا. جرمش به جز عشق خدا چی بوده؟ خیبر گشا رنگ رخش کبوده، یا فاطمه روی لبش سروده. بالا پر فرشته ها چون فرق او شکسته، زینب غمین و مضطرب به انتظار نشسته، به انتظار نشسته. حالا از زبان بی بی زینب بگو بابای من مرا بابای من
بابای من بابای من
تو جلوه جمال حق تو آفتاب عالمی، تو با تمام انبیا تو بیشتر ز آدمی. یا امیر المؤمنین یا علی ابن ابی طالب، یا سیدنا و مولانا انا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك الى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها اشفع لنا يا وجيها باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها فبمولى الكونين غام أمير المؤمنين يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك واكفنا يا قاضي الحاجات ويا كافي المهمات انك مجيب الدعوات انك على كل شيء قدير. خدایا ما را ببخش و بیامرز، عاقبت امور ما، عاقبت امور فرزندان ما، پدر مادرهای ما ختم به خیر بگردان. آنی و کمتر از آنی ما را از امیر المؤمنین و فرزندانش جدا نگردان. مرزای اسلام، مرزای شیعه شفای عاجل کرامت بفرما. در فرج مولا و صاحب امر ما امام زمان ما تعجیل بفرما. ما را از اعوان و انصار و یاران و شیعیان خاص در رکابش قرار بده. به فرج آقامون امام زمان گره از کار عالم بگشای. به فرج آقامون امام زمان کید و مگیر دشمنان به خودشون برگردان. خدایا خداوندا به حق امیر المؤمنین هر کس به دینت به قرآنت خیانت میکنه اگر قابل هدایت نیست و نابود بفرما. انشالله که به حق آقا امیرالمومنین روزی بشه یه همچین شبی حلقه بزنیم دور حرمش، انشالله زائر باشیم ایوان نجف رو و به حق آقامون امیرالمومنین رزق و روزی شب‌های قدر هممون انشالله و همه محبین اهل بیت وافر باشه. مهمان کنیم همه شهدا رو، گذشته ها رو، تمام کسایی که بین ما بودن و جاشون خالی این شبا، حاج آقای مجیدی، حاج آقای کیومرثی، همه بزرگوارهایی که به قول معروف مهمانن سر سفره آقا امیرالمومنین، بیبی فاطمه زهرا سلام الله علیها، خورجی خانم کاظمینی و همه گذشتگانم فیض ببرن. بخوانیم رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحه مع الصلوات.
Sammy's gonna come to our house and do something stupid. Yes.